Welcome to the Osceola Seminole Sidelines, here with football analyst Mark Salva. I'm Bob Ferrante. Hope you're having a great weekend. Florida State 3-0, but a very uncomfortable 3-0 after that win up at Boston College. And I think maybe that's maybe where we need to start. This was a troubling weekend for a lot of college football teams. We saw South Alabama go to Stillwater and beat Oklahoma State. We saw Kansas State lose on the road. Tennessee lost at the Swamp. That's what they do. But still, it's a big upset for Billy Napier and the Gators. Alabama struggling to figure out who their quarterback is, struggling to find offense. Georgia was trailing at the half at home to South Carolina. It continues. Texas and Wyoming was an interesting game. Of course, the fireworks between Colorado and Colorado State to finish a wild Saturday night into Sunday morning. We've called this one a clunker. I've called this winning abysmal. It's not winning ugly. It was winning abysmal. I don't think we've seen too many wins that in some ways feel like it's a setback in terms of development and progress as far as what you're building towards in a season like this. But maybe Florida State is not as dominant as we thought. Maybe BC with some Georgia high school stars between Robichaux and Castellanos, a little bit better than we were giving them credit for. But after a time to watch, second watch here, Mark Salva, Pat Burnham, Charles Fishbein have kind of weighed in on our message board, giving some of their thoughts as they go through the film of Florida State and BC. But Mark, as you're kind of letting the first watch marinate and into that second watch, what are some of your thoughts here?
Yeah, typically these things aren't as bad as you think, and they aren't never as good as you think, right? I mean, that's been my experience my whole career, dealing with going back and looking at the film. And that's no different here. We tend to react at the spur of the moment, have a knee-jerk reaction. I know when we did the first reaction video for LSU, Fish was saying we're going to win the national championship, and now, we have a win, but an ugly, ugly win. And now everybody's like, we're not going to win another game, right? So I think the truth is obviously somewhere in the middle. We're probably not as dominant as we thought or as appeared maybe in the LSU. I think LSU was a good matchup for us, and that's why it was the dominating performance it was. And on a lot of levels, this was a bad matchup for us, and just mentally, we weren't running at peak efficiency. And and we're still not good enough to run. If we don't run at peak efficiency, we can look bad and we're vulnerable. And there are certain things that have popped up that over the course of these first three games, that if they don't get corrected, are going to be problems down the line. So yeah, we're not invulnerable, that's for sure. We're still a very, very, very good football team. I think the improvements on the defensive line are real. I know they are. I think our offensive line depth is playing well right now, especially with two key injuries, and we're still very effective. I think, the skill talent we have on offense is formidable. It's the best. I still think it's the best in the country from what I've seen. But I don't think we have some players that are not playing at peak efficiency. And when if that happens, I think things we can continue to get better. We better get a whole lot better by this coming week, right? Or else I think Clemson might see some things that they could take advantage of. And if we don't get these things corrected, some of these things, it could be trouble for us this week and moving forward.
Before we dive into some of those second watch thoughts on offense and defense, and we'll probably dive into the defense first because there's just a lot to unpack from those third down issues to mobile quarterback, and Robichaux had a much bigger day than I think any of us were expecting. A really physical running back from Columbus, Georgia. There were some good moments from the defensive line, some good moments from the offensive line. Didn't feel like Florida State sustained that run enough. We saw some good runs from Rodney Hill, for example. You're starting to see why we all kind of fell in love with Rodney Hill, for example. And we did see that offensive line push at times. Defensive line, same thing. This has been a heralded defensive line because of that depth, because of the rotation. Mike Norvell saying this is the kind of depth that that you need if you have aspirations of competing for a championship. This didn't feel like anywhere near their best performance. Is this a one-off? Is this a, hey, thinking ahead, looking ahead, potentially taking BC for granted, or is there something bigger here that maybe concerns you?
So, okay, let me start with the defensive line. They didn't have a bad day. In fact, they had a pretty good day. I thought they did what they were supposed to do. I think what the problems were on those third downs. At least, I've been through the first half. I haven't gone through the second half yet, but I've been through the first half, and it was a scheme thing, right? So those big quarterback runs, those big plays. Let me go back. The first touchdown was busted coverage, and it's something that's popped up in 3 games. That is, they line up a certain way, they motion. A lot of times it's trips, motion, 2 trips, or motion from doubles, 2 trips, and guys are bumping coverage, and guys get lost on who has who. It happened against LSU, first play of the game. It happened at Southern Miss twice, right? So it happened on the wheel route that Akeem Den got hurt on, right? That guy was running free. It was a shift motion, third guy out, wheel route, uncovered. He did it again at Southern Miss, where we pressured the quarterback and the ball was thrown short, but the tight end was wide open for a touchdown. So that happened twice. And they did it here, same kind of thing. Motion to trips, linebackers, everybody's bumping coverage, rotating in the secondary. Somebody gets lost in the shuffle. They run a simple little spot route, and a play action fake, eye candy, and linebackers get lost. Tatum Bethune reacted great, right? He took the fake, immediately turned around, found the tight end, got under the tight end stick route. Perfect. Lundy takes the fake, starts looking around, doesn't know what to do, and there's little number 4 sitting right there over the ball, catches the ball, and then a bad angle by Kevin Knowles, guy runs for a touchdown. Okay, so underneath coverage. That's something that's reared its ugly head 3 games in a row. The long quarterback runs in the first half for sure. Okay, I don't know if you guys noticed this, but on the first play, that was a penalty, right? They were offside. They lined up in a quads trip. They had everybody on one side of the field, and they snapped the ball, but it was an illegal motion. But they had us. We didn't know how to line up. We're scrambling around, not lining up. Didn't see it again until I think it was backed up on the goal line, and it was third. It was third and forever. No, it was the one before that. It was going in on their touchdown. It was third and forever. They lined up in that formation again. It was a straight quarterback draw off the weak side. So you have 5 receivers on one side. They run a quarterback draw on the other side. We don't line up right, and he's wide open. He runs for 40 yards and sets up their touchdown. Right? I think it sets up their field goal. And then on the 45-yard run, when we had them backed up 3rd and 15 or 17 or something like that, same thing. They ran that formation 4 times. They had us every time. We don't line up right. 2 of the times were penalties, and 2 of them were 40-yard quarterback runs, right? So that kind of thing. So, but in between, defensive line is stuffing the run. We're stuffing the run. We're stuffing the run. They ran a screen. They got the 4th down. It was 4th and 1 when they ran that screen. They were half yard short, and they lined up and decided to go for it after coming out of the timeout. We're in base defense. They're in 3 tight ends. We're in base defense. So we got DBs and stuff lined up over tight ends, and there's a big bubble there, and they just run a wedge and get an easy first down. I mean, so I guess what I'm trying to say is, not only were the guys not at their best, I don't think our coaches were either. We couldn't get lined up. We had some holes in the defense that we couldn't get corrected. Guys not knowing what to do in certain situations. It made for big plays at the wrong times. But everything in between was great. Defensive line was stuffing them. They weren't getting pushed around. That guy's a good quarter. I mean, he's quick. He's fast. He's twitchy. He's hard to hem in. And we handled Jane Daniels okay. So there's as far as the defensive line goes, I still think they're really, really good. I think the problem comes in the underneath coverage, and when people start motioning and doing stuff, can we get lined up and can we get the correct assignments? That's the problem right now. Okay. Offensive line wise, we didn't run a lot of counter again. We ran a lot of zone. And same thing I've been saying before is if you're going to run the zones, you got to run it a lot because you got to get the feel of things. So there was a couple of situations. They were running a lot of 5 and 6 man pressures, right? Playing a single safety, playing man. They're pressing Keon and Johnny, right? And running a lot of 5 and 6 man pressures. And so we were outnumbered in the box for the running game. And I think the offensive line did a pretty decent job, but decent is not good enough on the offensive line, especially when you're outnumbered, because you let one guy go and he blows up the whole play. And that was pretty much the case. Everybody's doing pretty good. Byers misses a call. Linebacker runs free, knocks Toafili for 1 yard loss, 0 yard gain. Little stuff like that happened, off and on in the running game most of the time. But there were some times when we blocked it pretty good and got some good yards. It's just, and I'll say this too, Trey Benson to me, it does not look like the same guy he was last year. I don't know what you think, Bob, but a little tentative, not taking it up into the line of scrimmage before he cuts. It's just not. This doesn't look like the same guy right now, and I don't know why that is. I don't know if he's got dollar signs in his head and he's worrying about the NFL, this and that. I mean, we've seen it happen before, right? Wouldn't be the first time that's happened, but. And look, he's got a bright future ahead of him. At least he did. But if he doesn't perform, that he's losing money, right? So I think that that's what it is. And honestly, Jordan Travis hasn't been his sharpest. He's thrown some really good balls, and he's thrown some pretty average balls. So yeah, it's not as bad as you think, but it could be better. But it's not as good as we had hoped it would be. Play after play after play. We as fans expect every play to be perfect, us to be playing at peak efficiency every time, and that's not necessarily realistic. They were emotional for this game, we weren't, and they were sharp, we weren't, and I think that really encapsulates what last night was.
Yeah, I think we'll talk briefly about Trey and JT, and then kind of go back into the defense. I think your comment on Trey is pretty accurate. I mean, the numbers back this up that Trey is not breaking as many tackles. He's not forcing defenders to miss with as much regularity as he certainly did in 2022, where I think he was leading the nation, according to the Pro Football Focus numbers of just forcing defenders to miss tackles. How much does Florida State miss a Trayshawn Ward, for example? And they're trying to figure out, is a Rodney Hill a guy who can step in that kind of role? We didn't see very much of Keziah Holmes in this game. We saw some of Lawrence Toafili, and hey, he caught a really nice ball down the sideline, looked like a receiver on that one catch. And then the one, the short one where he turns around, he's got to secure that ball fast before the defender hits him and jars the ball loose. So yeah, we've seen some really, really good from Toafili. We also saw probably his worst play as a Seminole there, with that fumble, and that created an easy 6 for BC. So let's go back to the defense here. And I think a big storyline is Florida State was really very good at third and fourth down defense through 2 games. And then against Boston College, whether it was, Castellanos finding a running lane, finding an opening over the middle, Robichaux was, I think he had 5 or 6 conversions just by himself, just being a physical runner between the tackles.
Yeah.
What did you see? Any commonalities in these third or fourth down situations for Florida State?
Well, I think, this defense is built for spread offenses, right? So we're a nickel defense. In other words, we're 4-2-5 defense essentially. And Deloach and Bethune are not big thumpers, and they're built to run in space, tackle in space, cover guys in space. And because of modern offenses, majority of the offenses we see are that running quarterbacks that can move, covering guys in space. And so what do you give up? You give up when you get a Robichaux and you get a big offensive line of guys that want to run a heavy, heavy offense. There was a couple times Kalen was free, goes up there and hits Robichaux, and Robichaux drags him for 3 or 4 yards. I mean, he's what is Kalen? He's 215, 220, maybe.
He's safety-ish at linebacker, right?
Right. And so, and even Lundy, who was our thumper, has leaned up and gotten faster and all that kind of thing too. But, you know, so, you know, it's, you give up something to get something. And, you know, it's not a good matchup. BC is just not a good matchup for us in that way. Right. So again, I'm not going to panic on it. You know, it's just, it is what it is, you know. And so I think the bigger issue is communication on the back end, getting the coverage rotations right, and everybody knowing who they got and underneath coverage, and then eye discipline with eye candy, you know, knowing how to react, right, and knowing what you're looking at, what you're seeing. I made the comment also on the second watch, you know, on some of those quarterback draws. I mean, the center sets and then immediately runs out. I mean, you can't sit there and watch the center and tell me you didn't know that was a draw right now, right? And here we got guys running backwards, you know, backing up. I mean, come on, you know, when you read through the offensive line, I've heard that all my life, read through the offensive line, you know? And so, you know, it's that football IQ thing that I think is popping up a little bit, and it's got to get corrected like really fast, because it's been identified as a weakness. Now, I know if I see it, everybody else sees it too, right? And so what are people going to do? They're going to line up one way, motion, do things another way, give some eye candy, fake, half rolls, whatever, and then try to get those guys confused. So they've got 3 days to get that crap corrected and get better at it, or figure out another answer, right, to free those guys up. And the one answer is always make it simpler. If there's a way to make it simpler for them, you know, and cover that in other ways, cover those deficiencies in other ways, those areas in other ways. You know, that's where defense coordinators can get creative and figure that stuff out. You know, we got an issue here. How can we make it simpler for our guys, or how can we cover it in another way? So that to me is the bigger concern, and one that needs to be addressed, because I don't think anybody, if we know how somebody's going to line up, there's nobody going to beat us. Right? If everybody's just going to line up and we're going to play 7-on-7, and our defensive line is probably going to be better than your offensive line, I think moving forward that's probably going to be the case. Then I don't see it being a problem. The problem is when people out scheme us or out, you know, get a little bit clever or find a little something that we're weak. Kind of like that's what BC did. They fell into something that we didn't have an answer for, and we didn't find an answer for until maybe later in the game. So,
yeah, PFF had forced it with 15 missed tackles. That might be a tad generous if you're kind of going back and looking at it. I think a missed tackle is to the eye of the beholder as to what you view a miss or not. And a mobile quarterback will make your defense. That'll drive those numbers up, especially. We're still early in the season. Tackling is becoming habitual because you don't tackle very much in August. I think this is probably a bad time to face a team like BC, maybe. But something that Pat Burnham also mentioned, that this is yet another mobile quarterback who's had kind of a field day, maybe a career high passing day, running day, potentially both, against Florida State. And mobile quarterbacks do this against defense. This is just not unique to a Florida State defense. But were you a little bit surprised at just how efficient at times Castellanos was as far as just moving the ball, especially I think first quarter, second half? He really seemed to stall out at times in the second quarter there.
Yeah. He was better throwing the ball than I thought, number one, but he was throwing to guys that were wide open too. Again, no underneath coverage. You know, we're playing, you know, shell or playing off coverage, and there's nobody underneath. I mean, that's easy for a quarterback. I don't care how experienced or inexperienced you are. If you're playing that position, you ought to be able to hit that throw. So, you know, and look, we are comfortable. We're up 21 and cruising, and we have a series of events that are just uncharacteristic of this football team. So that tells me we weren't mentally all there, right? We weren't at our sharpest mentally. You know, it was sloppy. Whatever the circumstances were, it really doesn't matter, because if you're going to be a championship team, the circumstance shouldn't dictate your standard of performance, and it shouldn't. You know, if you're going to have consistency of performance at a championship level, you can't let the circumstances dictate that. You got to be good enough to play at that level and not be high and low dependent on what the circumstances are, right? And so that's not an excuse. I'm not making an excuse. I'm telling you that's what happened. We just weren't mentally sharp. Trey Benson, fumbling that kickoff, that's just a lack of concentration and a lack of just being kind of taken by surprise, and I won't say he's panicking, but I mean, obviously maybe he hadn't thought through, what if they do this, right? The Toa Feely deal, I mean, that was a bang bang play. I mean, that happens. Is that on Jordan? I got to look at it. I haven't gotten to that play yet, but is that on Jordan? Laying it out there and knowing there's a guy coming up there. We don't have good numbers to that side. I got to look at that again, and see if that was the case. I mean, a lot of times I put that on the quarterback. I said, that's not the guy to go to in that situation. We used to call quarterbacks like that laundrymen because you're leaving your guy out to dry, right? And so, is that on Jordan? That's what I got to look at. But, but you take those two plays away, right? Then, we win comfortably, and we're not in such a whatever. Yeah, there's concern about the quarterback runs and stuff, but that's a problem for everybody. It's something we take advantage of all the time with Jordan, right? And everybody does. If you have that guy, use it. That's a weapon. That's the hardest guy to account for. You can't cover everybody and cover the quarterback. That's an age-old problem, and we're not the first one to be a victim of it. I think the disappointing thing was those big 40-yard runs, those big runs that he had were schemed, and it was due to us not lining up right or not covering all the gaps correctly.
So I think before we transition into offense, we've now seen 3 games. It's still a small body of work from the defense. You've seen some commonalities in some of these coverage busts. For example, we've seen more missed tackles against LSU and BC, as you would expect, not as many against a Southern Miss. That's maybe to be expected.
But to me, Bob, that's it. That's indecision, right? So okay. if you're missing tackles, you're diving at guys' ankles and you're out of position. You're not in position to square a guy up, and that means you're a step slow or a step late, and that tells me there's a little bit of indecision or you're not in the right spot. And again, it goes back to, okay, are we getting lined up right? That's what I see. That's usually what it is for me.
So I think what I'm hearing is this is a good question. I think we want to get to is how much of this is correctable. And when you're talking about pre-snap alignment, that sounds pretty darn correctable.
Oh yeah.
Anything else that you see correctable versus not correctable on defense at this point?
No, that's all. To me, that's all it is.
Yeah.
I think physically we're not getting beat. Physically it's mistakes. Like I said, 2/3 of the plays we're stuffing them. Guys in the right spots. We're tackling. We're all over them. It was those other plays, and they just happen to be on third downs or reconversion downs or whatever is where it reared its ugly head. And you got to give credit to BC, man. They had a good plan against us. They knew they played to their advantages really well, and we didn't handle it real well.
Very fair. For Jeff Halfley, a coach who we thought might have been on the hot seat, I thought he and his staff had a good game plan overall for Florida State. Well, let's move over to offense. And one of the questions on the message board has been just how the offensive line is adapting. With Maurice Smith out, with Robert Scott out, they have depth. That's a good thing. Florida State has acquired depth through high school recruiting, through the portal, because injuries happen. We know last year this happened, losing Caden Lyles before the games even started, losing Bless Harris one game into the year. So Florida State coaches have been prepared for this. But one of the questions still is, how much of this adjustment without Smith and Scott, is it impacting things up front as far as how efficiently you move the ball on the ground or through the air?
I don't think so. I think in this game specifically, they were outnumbering us in the box, and so that takes tremendous communication and coordination to make sure you're blocking the right 5 guys, right? If they got 6 or 7 up there, are we blocking the right 5 or 6, or are we blocking the right 5 and handling the 6th with Jordan, in a way that we can get good running seams? And if one guy doesn't quite do it right, the whole play can blow up. And so I think that was the case for me. I mean, I don't think Maurice and Rob Scott not being there really affected that. I thought Darius did a fine job for the little bit I've seen it so far. He's doing a fine job. The breakdowns just kind of happen here, kind of happen there, one play. And that's the thing about the running game, Bob, is that, you got to run the ball consistently for those guys to get a feel. I said it a lot of times on this show. I say it all the time to anybody that'll listen, right? When you're committed to running the ball, you get better at running the ball because offensive linemen and backs get a feel for how these fits are going to happen and how, where the seams are, where, how the linebacker's going to run, and how the backs get a feel for, I got to press the line of scrimmage, get in the line of scrimmage, let my guys get on their blocks, and then I can cut. These things take a feel. And it's one thing that's been evident to me, is when we do commit, like the second half of LSU, we committed to running the ball, and by gosh, we got good at it, right? And otherwise, it's been just kind of, herky-jerky in terms of, where are we implementing? It's like we run the ball just because it's time to run the ball. It's not, this is going to be a big part of what we're going to do today. It seems like, especially last game and the start of the LSU game, and even some of this game, it's like, how can I dial up big chunk plays? How can I use all these toys I have? I got Keon Coleman, Jaheim Bell, Johnny Wilson, Trey Benson. I got Lawrence LT Toafili. I've got Winston Wright. I've got, Biscuit. I've got more. I got a lot of toys out here. How can I get these guys out in space and dial up some chunk plays? When, sometimes let's just line up and just get the big guys up front lathered up and let them get a feel for how we're going to run the ball. And let's take advantage of that part of our game. We did it last year, right? Last year, that was a big, we committed to running the ball, and that opened up the passing game. That made for those big chunk plays in the passing game. I think, in my opinion, I think we got to get back to that commitment a little bit more. Even if it means you might have a 3 and out every occasionally, or you might come up a little short on 2nd and 8, it's okay to run the ball. And that used to be what we did. That's what we did last year, and now we're going to throw a wide receiver screen out there or, whatever. And we get 2 yards, I just, of course I'm a line coach, right? Every line coach I know makes that comment, and every wide receiver offensive coordinator wants to, dial up chunk plays and show how smart they are, but whatever. But to me, that's why I really fell in love with this offense, was that commitment to run the ball was there, and I'm just not seeing it to that degree right now, early in the season.
Yeah, I think you're answering Alex's question. That was something that he brought up earlier in the show. Do we think we're a running team but are actually a passing team? And I think Mark kind of giving some perspective there. We want to see Florida State run the ball a lot more. And hey, props to Jaheim Bell for a really good game. I thought Jaheim was effective, much more as a receiver, pass catcher. We saw some guys from Boston College who did not want to try to tackle Jaheim Bell. I mean, he was a little bit elusive there, but we saw a lot of guys who are trying to use some arm tackles to bring down Jaheim, and that's just not going to work. Johnny Wilson had a bounce back game. We kind of talked a little bit about Johnny after being shut out to some extent against Southern Miss. And that catch on the sideline where he high pointed that one ball and brought it down, that's high level stuff, and it's good to see him back. Something I wanted to ask you, Mark, is the theory that Ron Dugans has put out there to the guys among the receivers. You have to be unselfish. You have to know that you're going to have your game and you may only have one catch. Celebrate everybody else, all of their production. But to some extent, we're seeing some hot and cold performances. Is that okay? Is that going to be okay where, hey, Keon Coleman's going to be quiet one day, Johnny's going to have a big day. Hey, Jaheim's going to have a big day, but last week he didn't so much, for example. Is that okay, or do guys have to have enough touches every game just to feel good about what they're doing as far as just being part of the offense?
Well, there's one ball. There's one ball.
Amen.
Right. Yeah, it's okay because there's more to playing wide receiver than just catching the ball. There's the blocking part of it. There's lining up right. There's taking 2 guys away so one guy can have single coverage. there's a lot to the position, in all the skill positions, right? Like I said, we got a lot of weapons, and people got to count for all those weapons. And so, yeah, it may be your day one day, it may be somebody else's day another day, and that's okay. As long as that other guy is having his day, and if he's the one that is having the matchup favorability, then you know what, convert on those, and everything's fine. Yeah, you can celebrate with them. You're exactly right. I agree with Ron on that. So I will say, though, as much press and man as we were seeing, I was disappointed that we couldn't figure out a way to get Keon a couple more targets, attempts, formation in some way. I thought there were more opportunities out there for him too, that just didn't work out. I mean, Johnny was the guy of the day, and that's fine. And he did take advantage of them. So, but look, we used to love back in the day when people, especially when we had Charlie, right? Oh, please play man coverage and please blitz. I remember after we lost to Notre Dame in '93, we played NC State the next week, and they decided they wanted to play man and blitz this whole game. Please do, because I think we hung 70 on them, right, that game. If you got a poised quarterback back there that can deliver ball and you got weapons on the outside, that's the advantage for us, and so if that turns out, if Boston College doing that, and I don't know if you could say they had success, but because we kind of started to run away with it in there in the third quarter, and then the weird stuff started happening. But if that's the way people want to play us, we got to take advantage of that. And Coleman is a big part of that, and he's got to convert on some of those fade routes, on some of those. And look, like on the one in the first quarter that Jordan threw to him, some will say is a little flat, but I think he was press coverage. He was trying to back shoulder him. And he's got to make a better play on that ball. I think he's capable of doing it. He's held to a high standard. If he's the guy he wants to be, he's got to make that catch. So I think there were some opportunities there for him that maybe we didn't quite get to for whatever reason. And in the course of a game, it's easy to sit back and say, well, we should have done this, we should have done that. But the bottom line is, Johnny converted his opportunities. Jaheim converted his opportunities. So yeah, even Morlock got a nice catch and run.
Yeah. Well, I know a lot of people are asking about injuries. There's no updates Sunday evening as we're talking here. Of course, Mike Norvell is going to be very reluctant to let out anything on Monday when he talks, it being Clemson week. Don't expect much detail on Jordan Travis, who obviously came back into the game after the half. Don't expect too much of an update on Rob Scott, Murray Smith, Akeem Dent. I know there were a couple other guys who went down during the game. Look, this is going to be a storyline throughout the year. We're just going to have to kind of ride it out, and we'll give you updates Saturday pregame as far as who's warming up, who's available, and all that. Mark, I think one thing we kind of want to, as we wrap up the show and discuss, is this can be that kind of wake-up call for a program with aspirations. Look, whether you think Florida State's going to the playoff, playing for the ACC title, or not, if you're just down on Florida State right now, that's fine. But a game like this can be good for a coach, can be good for veteran leaders on the team. How do you use this as a coach or a player to just say, okay, guys, that was our worst effort. Let's make sure it doesn't happen again?
Well, you use it by putting on the film and showing everybody, look, we didn't even get close to playing our best, and we won the game, but we got lucky this time. Next time we might not be so lucky. So tighten it up, pay attention out at practice, study your craft, perfect your craft, study film during the week, anticipate, know the game plan, anticipate what you're going to see, practice your checks, practice your assignments, mentally, for sure. I mean, pay attention. And so, because you got to be able to react in the correct manner, and don't let the circumstances dictate your performance, right? Keep yourself at a high standard on the practice field. Practice with a purpose, right? It's all you have to do is put on the film and show them. And I never got the feeling these guys thought they arrived. I don't think that was it. I think they just were not mentally into it for whatever reason. 12:30 game, maybe travel. I don't know. I use that excuse for Southern Miss too. I said, well, it was a late game and it was a short week. I mean, these aren't excuses. These just may be reasons. But next week's an early game. It's a travel game. It's not a short week, thank goodness. There's no hurricane on the horizon, at least that I've seen. So let's and here's the thing too. As a coach, on these games like against Clemson, against Florida, against Miami, against these big opponents, don't play the game on Tuesday and Wednesday, right? There's a tendency to want to go out there and you got a lot of juice and you're excited about the challenge that's coming forth. You don't want to play the game on Tuesday and Wednesday. Practice with a purpose, learn your assignments, learn the game plan, anticipate what you're going to see, take a lot of mental reps when you're not out on the practice field, study film throughout the week, take care of your business. And that's how you get better. There's a lot of things to correct off of this film. It's off the past three. So, you're going to see it again. I guarantee you're going to see it again. So get ready. How we respond, and that's Mike Norvell's favorite phrase, right? How are we going to respond? Right? It's time to respond. This is a response game right here. What's our response going to be after this performance in Boston College? Look, we tend to respond pretty good under Mike Norvell. So I anticipate, being at our best. And if they beat us at our best, so be it. But I have a feeling we're going to roll out there and we're going to give them our best performance come Saturday, 12:30.
Yeah, I think we talked about this a lot throughout the preseason, that the September schedule would be arguably the toughest chunk with LSU, BC, and Clemson back to back on the road. November is going to be tough too. Obviously, we'll see what Pitt looks like, and you got Miami and Florida too. So not many easy parts of this schedule. And the ACC has played pretty good football. We've seen a lot of out of conference upsets from this league. So it's been a little bit better than I think we expected. So Mark, as we wrap up, I haven't seen much of Clemson. I'm not sure you've seen a ton of them either. But Florida State has a chance to go 4-0. I think what I'm trying to get at is we might have taken 3-1 in September, but Florida State's got a legit shot to go 4-0. And if they beat Clemson, it'd be the first time in 10 years up at Clemson now. That would be a big one as far as just pushing that confidence, momentum into an off week. You get that time to recharge, refocus for the 3 home games. Florida State has an incredible opportunity ahead. I know we'll talk more about Clemson, but maybe just your kind of big picture early thoughts on this matchup kind of ahead for us.
Yeah, regardless of what happens on Saturday, it's still all right there in front of us. We put ourselves in position right now, no matter what happens on Saturday, that everything we want is in front of us, including a playoff. Because we could technically play Clemson again or somebody else and still win the championship, still win the league. And if we do that and look impressive and beat Miami, Florida, everybody else leading into it, it's still right there in front of us. So that should take some pressure off of this game, right? It's not we lose, we're done, right? So take that off the table, go out and cut it loose, right? That to me, that's number one. I think, big picture, we've shown some flaws. We know we're not infallible. So, that cushion we thought we might have had, we can just roll the helmet out there and win. That's gone. And that's a good thing, right? That's a good thing. So we got to play our best game to beat the people on our schedule. Duke's no pushover for sure. Right. So, you're right. I would have taken 3-1 coming out of September. And I think anybody that was realistic thought that was true, but you are also right in that this is a tremendous opportunity going into an open week, going into the middle part of our schedule to really take hold of this thing. And look, these guys are smart enough to know, and these coaches are smart enough to know they have a tremendous opportunity in front of them, and that to leave no stone unturned and take total advantage of this opportunity that we've put ourselves in. We being FSU, they've put themselves in a position to really do something special, and that's why I fully expect to see our best performance on Saturday, and then put ourselves in position to do something spectacular.
All right. Well, good stopping point for us. About 40 minutes of FSU discussion, kind of wrapping up BC and turning the page to Clemson. We appreciate y'all watching. Of course, if you're reading, thanks for subscribing on the Osceola.com. You can always check out that Second Look Sunday. We'll do that every week throughout the regular season. Mark Salva's got some thoughts, Pat Burnham, Charles Fishbein. I've got a couple. I still owe you some second half thoughts in there in that thread too. We'll get to that. If you missed part of the show, go back and check it out on YouTube. You can like and subscribe there. You can also listen on your Apple or Spotify feed, and we'll upload this to the site too if you want to listen to it there as you're going through your day. We hope you've had a great weekend. We hope you will tune in again next time. We'll have some more scouting reports on Clemson as the week progresses, some updates from the practice field Tuesday and Wednesday. And of course, Monday is the big press conference day where we'll get to talk with Mike Norvell and the coordinators. So again, for Mark Salva, I'm Bob Ferrante. Thanks for watching. This has been Seminole Sidelines, brought to you by the Osceola.
Go Noles, scalp them.